Click. Clack. A rhythmic, sharp sound sliced through the oppressive silence of 2 a.m. Min-suk's brow furrowed, his heavy eyelids peeling open. That noise, it was coming from the living room. It sounded like someone was scraping the hardwood floor with something sharp, something relentless. He reached for his wife's side of the bed, but the sheets were cold, the warmth long gone. With a sigh laced with irritation, he swung the bedroom door open. And in that moment, Min-suk's world tilted on its axis. There, in the center of the dark living room, bathed in a sliver of pale moonlight from the balcony window, his wife Seo-hee was dancing. On her feet were a pair of startlingly red dance shoes. Click, clack, the sound was coming from the tips of her toes. He called her name, his voice a dry rasp, but she didn't stop. Instead, she tilted her head at an unnatural angle and slowly, so slowly, turned to face him. Her red lipstick was smeared, and her eyes, vacant and unfocused, glinted in the darkness. A smile spread across her face, the most beautiful, and the most terrifying, smile he had ever seen. She finally spoke, her voice a sing-song whisper. "What's wrong, darling? Don't you want to dance, too?" Our story begins 3 months before this strange and terrible night. That evening, Min-suk arrived home, as he often did, well past midnight. A faint, cloying scent clung to him, a mixture of expensive cologne and the warmth of another woman's skin. On the table, a dinner lovingly prepared by Seo-hee was growing cold. But the moment Min-suk picked up his spoon, his face soured. "What is that smell in here? Is that fish?" He ripped off his tie, tossing it aside, completely ignoring the effort she had made. Seo-hee said nothing, simply removing the soup bowl from the table. The smell in the house wasn't fish. It was the heavy, floral perfume from the foundation smudged on the collar of Min-suk's white shirt. She saw the stain, the undeniable proof, but pretended she hadn't, silently pushing the shirt into the washing machine. For her, their marriage had long ago become a tired play, and she was just going through the motions. But the fragile thread of Seo-hee's patience finally snapped the very next morning. After Min-suk left for work, she went down to the garage to retrieve the wallet he'd left in his car. The dashcam, by chance, was still on, replaying a phone call from the day before. Her husband's voice, slick and casual, echoed through the car's speakers, plunging like a dagger into her heart. "My wife? Oh, her. I haven't seen her as a woman in years. She's just, like a piece of furniture in the house. You know, too old and annoying to get rid of, but a pain to actually use." The wallet slipped from her numb fingers, clattering onto the concrete. Furniture. That's all she was to him. The woman who breathed, who cooked, who cleaned, she was worth less to her husband than a dusty old chair. Slumped on the cold floor of the parking garage, a chilling poison, not tears, began to fill Seo-hee's eyes. That afternoon, the only sound in the bathroom was the snip, snip of silver scissors. Seo-hee stared at her reflection, her eyes burning with a new fire, as she hacked away at the long hair she had always kept neatly tied back. The dark strands falling to the floor were the shells of her patience, of her obedience, of the good wife she had tried so hard to be. With a ragged, short bob framing her face, the woman in the mirror was no longer a victim. She dragged an old, dusty box from the back of the closet. Wiping it clean, she lifted the lid. Inside lay a pair of worn-out dance shoes from a lifetime ago, from when she was a promising young dancer with a future full of light. Seo-hee made a decision. She would not cry, she would not beg. Instead, she would destroy him with the one weapon he never knew she had. In her hand, she clutched a crumpled flyer for a local dance studio. The change came without warning. Within days, the house was in disarray. Min-suk's shirts, always perfectly pressed, were now crumpled in a heap in the closet. The refrigerator was empty, not even a bottle of water to be found. When he came home and yelled, he, unlike before, met his anger with a cold indifference. "You're a busy man," she'd say. "Well, so am I." Her clothes were even more shocking. The baggy t-shirts were replaced with form-fitting dresses. She started wearing dark makeup and going out late into the night. Min-suk was stunned. The furniture that was supposed to stay put was suddenly moving on its own, and the cracks in his perfect, narcissistic world began to show. And then came the final straw. He started coming home smelling of another man's cologne. Min-suk's suspicion quickly festered into obsession. While he was in the shower, he stole her phone. Even the lock pattern had changed, but he finally cracked it, his fingers swiping frantically. He opened her messages and found it, a contact named Tango Master. The conversation was sickening. "Tonight, I'm all yours. You were so intense, I could barely breathe." Min-suk's hands began to tremble with rage. In his mind, his affairs were proof of his power and success. But his wife, his property, with another man? That was an unforgivable insult. That night, he stood over her sleeping form, grinding his teeth. "How dare you cheat on me?" he seethed, completely forgetting his own betrayals, wrapping himself in the comfortable cloak of the victim. The next day, Min-suk started using work as an excuse to follow her. With a black cap and mask hiding his face, he looked every bit the stalker he had become. He trailed her to a rundown building on the outskirts of the city, to a dance hall in the basement. Peering through the window, under the moody glow of red lights, he saw it. He was pressed against a tall, handsome man, moving with a sensual grace he had never seen. The man's face was cleverly hidden in the shadows, but Seohee's expression was one of pure ecstasy, a look he had never once been able to give her. Min-suk wanted to smash the door down, to tear them apart, but he stopped himself. He needed proof. Hard, undeniable proof. To throw her out with nothing, not a single penny in alimony, he needed the perfect, devastating blow. He planted miniature recording devices all over the house. In the bedroom, the living room, even inside his wife's car. At the office, he couldn't work, sitting at his desk all day with an earphone in, listening. But what he heard only drove him deeper into madness. The sound of her humming to herself. Whispered phone calls. And every night, that rhythmic thumping from the living room. He was certain she was bringing a man home, but the ghost was always just out of reach, and the uncertainty was eating him alive. He started taking sedatives just to fall asleep. Meanwhile, Seohee grew more beautiful, more vibrant with each passing day. The contrast was a poison arrow to his fragile ego. Finally, the day of reckoning arrived. Min-suk watched as Seohee got into a strange man's car and drove to a seedy motel district on the edge of town. "Got you," he whispered, a bitter smile twisting his lips. He immediately called the police, and then his lawyer. While adultery was no longer a criminal offense, catching her in the act would guarantee he would win the civil suit, leaving her destitute. Walking down the motel hallway with the officers behind him, Min-suk felt powerful, invincible. He stood before the door, took a deep breath, and began pounding on it with his fist. "Seohee. Open this door right now. I know you're in there." The door flew open with a crash, and Min-suk lunged into the room, his phone camera raised. But his finger froze over the shutter button. There were no tangled limbs on the bed. There was only Seohee, alone, sweating as if she'd been exercising. There was no man. And then, his eyes drifted to the walls. He stopped breathing. Every inch of the room was covered in printed sheets of paper. They were his text messages to his mistress, explicit, damning messages. Hotel receipts. Credit card statements. What is all this?" he stammered, backing away. He calmly walked to a small table and pressed play on a recorder. His own voice filled the room, the sound of him screaming threats and curses as he broke down the door just moments before. As Min-suk stood there, dumbfounded, the door to the adjoining room opened and a man walked in. It was the man from the dance hall, the man he was so sure was Seo-hee's lover. But when Min-suk saw his face, his blood ran cold. It was the husband of his mistress. The truth crashed down on him. Seo-hee hadn't been having an affair. She had found the other betrayed spouse, and together, they had planned this entire operation, exchanging evidence of their partner's infidelity. The dancing, the late nights, it was all bait. A carefully constructed performance designed to trigger his paranoia and make him walk right into his own trap. Seo-hee smiled, a chilling, triumphant smile. "All that evidence you gathered while you were stalking me," she said. "Thank you. You just proved to the police that I was never with another man." Seo-hee threw a thick manila envelope at his chest. It was the divorce petition. "In here," she said, her voice like ice, "is not only proof of your affair, but evidence of your illegal entry, your threats, and your stalking, all of which you just demonstrated in front of the police. You wanted to treat me like a piece of furniture. Let's see how the judge feels about that." Min-suk collapsed to the floor, the contemptuous stares of the police officers burning into him. He had been caught in a trap of his own making. Seo-hee slipped off her red dance shoes, holding them in her hand as she walked out of the motel room barefoot. Her silhouette in the doorway looked lighter than ever, but somehow, profoundly sad. The end was swift and brutal. Min-suk lost everything in the divorce. Rumors of his affair and his stalking of his own wife spread through his company like wildfire, and he was forced to resign. His glamorous life evaporated, leaving him with nothing. Months later, in a cramped, empty studio apartment, Min-suk was eating instant ramen when he heard a noise from the ceiling above. A rhythmic thumping. It sounded just like Seo-hee's tap dancing. "Stop it. Just stop it," he screamed, clamping his hands over his ears. But the sound wasn't real. It was a phantom. He was trapped forever in the memory of that night, haunted by the ghost of his wife in her red shoes, smiling that terrible smile. Meanwhile, Seo-hee stood in the middle of a vast, empty dance studio. Her reflection in the wall of mirrors showed a woman who was free, but whose eyes held a deep, hollow ache. The music started, and her feet began to move. Click. Clack. The sounds were crisp and alive, but her face was a mask, devoid of joy. She had won her revenge, but to destroy a monster, she had been forced to learn his ways, to become monstrous herself. She danced and danced, drenched in sweat, as if trying to physically expel the memory of those dark months from her body. Her solo performance seemed to have no end, and long after the studio lights were turned off, the sound of her heels continued to echo in the darkness. A man who treated a human soul like an old piece of furniture, and a woman who chose to become a villain to escape her own private hell. In the end, their tragic dance had no winner. It makes you wonder, what expression is on the face of the person beside you right now? Could it be, that deep inside their silent heart, another self in red shoes is already beginning a dance of their own? Tonight, perhaps you should listen very closely to the sounds that break the silence of 2 a.m.